but then we should potentially consider a much more elaborate dehumidification system in that hallway, because air conditioning, while it is a form of dehumidification, will often shut off by the time it reaches a set temperature for cooling, and you don't want to overcool the space. But oftentimes, humidity still exists in the space, and so having a different kind of system to just deal with dehumidification may be warranted. I think our approach was really, you were getting brand new systems inside that tag room in the professional development area, and those were going to deal with that musty smell that we all talked about that I knew was a concern. And so my thought was, if you wait and see if that equipment, by taking care of the outside space, improves the hallway, there's a potential to save money on not having to replace the hallway equipment. You can always do that incrementally, because it's a completely separate space, it's a completely different piece of equipment, it's going to be completely different ductwork, where the only connection we're making is to tie into the outside air penetration that we're making on the existing wall. So again, much of what you say is accurate. I hope I explained it effectively, and I hope I've given our reasons for why we would recommend you take a certain path rather than another. Yes, sir.
I do have a question. Of the $9,600 that you guys have in front of us as an addendum, what percentage of that work that you're saying has already been done?
Well, so I would offer to you that other than the interaction with the contractor back and forth on the additional pricing that he's providing us, and then coming out and doing inspections on that work, all the design work and the construction documents have been completed. So I would say there's probably 80% of that fee. Typically,
done.
Yeah, typically what we do is we allocate about 5% towards the bidding phase and another 15% towards the construction phase, where we're interacting with the contractors. And so there's, existing condition surveys and schematic design, and then construction documents and calculations and all that stuff. So I would say about 80% of that was already invested today. Correct.
Okay.
And just to clarify, we designed, and correct me if I'm wrong, we designed the cassette unit, and then we were asked to explore a different kind of unit, because a cassette unit is a standalone unit that has no ductwork.
Right.
So then we were asked to have ductwork looked at so that it would disperse the air more evenly throughout the hallway, and that required a redesign of the entire system, because you can't plug in ductwork to a cassette unit.
And that work has been done also
Yes.
at this point?
So technically, we've already provided 2 sets of services for you for the 1 fee.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. But of the work that has been done, 80% of it is done, 20% hasn't been yet.
That's correct.
Okay.
Can you just clarify why you looked at the cassette system first?
Because in our opinions, it was more than sufficient to cool the hallway. The hallway is relatively narrow comparatively, and it's long, and if all you're trying to do is to get the air, it's not an occupiable space. So you're not going to have heat gain in the hallway. Kids are going to walk through it, staff are going to walk through it, and then they're going to get into the classrooms or into the professional development area. It's where people are sitting and standing for long periods of time, along with the lights, that you have heat gain. So the hallway, a cassette unit, when properly sized, there are different size cassette units. In our professional opinions, the cassette unit was more than sufficient if your objective was just to get a little cooling into the hallway.
Did we talk about making this hallway space like a maker space or something with cabinets?
Yeah,
I
but
thought we had talked about that.
We did, and we told you that you can't do that. The hallway is a means of egress. A means of egress is it's considered an exit.
Even
where
as
it's
wide as that hallway is,
even
we
as
can't
wide-
even put 1 row of cabinets?
You can't.
0.
0. And the fire marshal will cite you if you ever did that. And don't get me wrong, plenty of schools that do that, and you find teachers teaching in hallways when you run out of space. But the hallway is considered an exit. There are rated hallway walls, there are rated doors. They lead on both ends to the exits and the stairwells, and there's nothing that is permitted by code that can block or prevent the free flow of traffic from adjacent spaces to the exits.
No matter how wide a hallway is?
Well, the answer is no matter how wide a hallway is, because if the hallway was designed as an exit, I would offer you the following image. If you're in New York City in a high-rise, you have a stairwell that's very long. You wouldn't put any kind of desks inside a stairwell in a high-rise. Take that stairwell, turn it on its side, and you have a hallway. So it serves the same purpose in that respect in schools. You're technically not allowed to have anything in the hallways up here either, because those two are exits. They take you from the classroom into a protected area to a means of egress door. So that's how the design is created.
But there's no minimum standard of like, if you can have a 4-foot hallway and that's okay, but you have an 8-foot hallway, you can't put cabinets on the side of it?
You
And
cannot.
you still have the 5-foot
The
opening?
standard hallways in educational environments, and I'm not going to get this 100% right, but they range from 7 feet minimum to 10 feet maximum. depending on whether lockers exist on one or both sides.
So if you had a 14-foot hallway, you could put something in. That's what I'm trying to ask you. There must
And
be
I'm
some.
trying to do my best to answer you, and maybe I'm not doing a good job of it. Under no circumstances can you put
okay.
anything into a hallway regardless of its width,
Okay.
if the hallway is defined as an exit.
Okay.
If you carve out another room and you make if you have a 20-foot
Right.
wide space
And you make
and you
another
put
room.
walls that are rated and
Right.
leave yourself a 10-foot hallway and that's the exit.
That's okay.
Now you can build the space into a 25-foot hallway, but it's no longer a hallway now.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'd just like to add, if I can, sorry, Rita. We talked about the hallway mostly because the tag room also involves the Odyssey of the Mind team. And during competition, they need space to spread out and develop sometimes large projects. And so we were thinking of utilizing that hallway, since it is a wider, longer hallway, just as an area that, they could at night take their stuff out of the closet in the classroom and work on it in the hallway. And there was a thought of maybe putting storage lockers, not different than student lockers, along the hallway, so they wouldn't have to go in and out of the classroom. They could just have their stuff or some of their supplies there. And that was the intent. It was never to have it as a permanent fixture or of anything be in the hallway. And then after having discussions with you, you had indicated it's a fire hazard, and we've since abandoned that. But I just want to reiterate, we've stated at the beginning that our primary concern in that space has been the damp humidity. We talked about it in the faculty room, in that storage room, and in the hallway as being our primary concern for conditioning the space. So while I know that the cassette unit or a mini split system, provides air conditioning when called on, the heating system right now has been there forever. You said out of the 3 units, I think only 1 works. And I personally don't think not doing anything and leaving that in place is kind of like
So
half solution.
How old are those cabinet heaters, the existing ones in the ceiling?
I don't know. I'm sure they're old. I don't know if they're original to the building.
And we
or if-
were counting on using them?
So for clarity,
Yes.
when we started to discuss the project,
Right.
the discussions that we were included in were limited to the space of the tag room, the professional development
I
area.
understand that.
So we never looked at the hallway mechanical equipment or the finishes there because the
Right.
focus from our perspective was in that adjacent space, and the budgetary concerns were, can we even get that built? We have no objection to assisting if you want to now improve the hallway as well. I'm just merely pointing out that that was not part of the original discussions that we were having, and our focus was on the adjacent space and the musty smell. I recall that conversation as if it were yesterday, but it was in the context of the tag room and the adjacent areas that we were renovating. The hallway didn't come up until much later. And again, I want to
I
reiterate.
actually have, so let me jump in here. I have in my notes, with design date December 4th, 2018, estimate date January 25th, 2019. You'll see my handwritten notes. Basement, include hall, light, electrical, HVAC, and flooring. Greg was freaking out about this, making sure that everything was done and done completely. So at some point, I don't know when, but this got lost, and I understand. And so as a board member, it gives me pause to come back. I understand there's more work, but an additional $10,000 is a lot of money to the school on top of $400,000 renovation. And, and now when we voted for the extra $15,000 in June, we thought it was for the hall and it was just for the floor. So there's some breakdown in communication along the way, because I feel caught off guard now, a month away from completion, and we have a hallway that is disgusting. It looks like garbage right now, and it's had a smell and water issues. And, we can't complete the classrooms and have has anybody been down? It's a ripped up floor in the hallway. We have a problem right now. I have no idea how much it's gonna cost. We have to paint the walls, install that floor. I don't know with the ceiling, you probably don't have to draw the ceiling, what we're doing there. The water fountains are 100 years old. And we don't know what we're gonna do with the air in the hallway. And so we're being asked for an additional $10,000 in architecture fee. I have no idea how much it's going to cost to finish the space. And do we have the money budgeted for that? So, you know, I have a lot of concerns here. How do
Well-
we fix this?
So, well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you have reservations, and I'm sorry that you have concerns, and I'm sorry that you think the communication broke down, and we'll own some of that. I can't speak to the notes that you put on your piece of paper
Right.
and whether they were ever communicated to us.
Right.
I just don't know. Again, what I can tell you is we're happy to help you,
Yeah,
but my recollection of the conversations, and if you remember, I stood before you with a budget of $500,000 before we got bids, and there was concerns about what are we going to cut. There was no talks about adding work. And, you know, this does happen periodically when we get a competitive price that is below our budget, then everyone expects that we can now do more because look how great the project came in under budget. And yet, it wasn't that long ago I stood before you and we were talking about what are we going to cut out of the $500,000 budget or what can we break down because there was a significant concern about the budget. So we are trying to manage many things. Expectations, we are trying to manage the budget that you said you had concerns about. And again, we're happy to help you with this, but as I've shared before, and I'm not going to repeat myself, but you know, we'll own some of the miscommunication. I'm sure we could have also done better, but I don't know what I don't know, and our focus was very much on that room.
And one thing I would just like to say is, you know, one, thank you for the work you've done, thank you for the board, the work you guys have done too. There was definitely a breakdown in communication in this. It seems very clear. I hear a lot of talk about we said this, we heard this, or whatever. Scope of work, I would hope, was clearly defined in writing. I think looking back at those scopes of works and where the changes are happening, it's great that you're willing to help us out on this. I think that's awesome. My concern, obviously, is there were some mistakes made along the way. That seems obvious. I don't think it's that interesting to point fingers at this. I think we need to solve the problem. I also think your decision to do a portion of this work or your company's decision to do a portion of this work outside of the way you would normally do it. Typically, you would come to us and ask before you do the work.
Absolutely.
You didn't. There's a lot of me that feels like that 80% that's already done, that's on you. Like, I feel very strongly about that. The fact that you did 80%, maybe it wasn't your business protocol. I appreciate you doing it for us. That feels like it's on you. The other 20% might be something that we would owe you at this point. Ultimately, I think we want to get the right thing done. I think there was probably problems with the scope, but that's my take at this point.
So just for clarity, the scope in our February document is very clear, and there's no reference to the hallway anywhere in the scope.
Sure.
So we do try to be good communicators about the scope we provide, the services we provide, the fee we provide, and I mean, I can't do much more than that.
I understand. I understand.
Mrs. Levy?
Thank you. My question is, so this is for your services. Is there some sort of approximation as to how much additional
Yeah.
fees is going to come from the contractor
Yeah,
at this point?
yes, the answer is the numbers we already have from the contractor for, do you have that? He did not give us numbers for the air conditioning in writing. He told us it was about $20,000 for the cassette unit, correct? So there are some of these, he has, I'm assuming the door installation is the door you were referring to in the hallway, which was $4,400. New ceilings and modifications, remove and replace water fountains, $3,200. There was a request to swap the windows back and forth, $4,800. The new double door, which is the other doorway in the hall, was $4,000. So the total of this proposal was $21,000 and change. I don't know what this means, the replace ceiling classroom?
That's the hallway ceiling.
Oh, so $13,500 for the hallway ceiling?
Is that just tile or replacing all the T-bars?
The grid and a tile.
All of it? It can't be rescued?
We
The
would-
styles-
We would
this-
direct it just to replace the ceiling. So, I mean, you could capture the grid, but you'll have bright shiny tile and a old
So you're
grid.
talking 22,000 plus 13,500.
Yeah, this totals about $34,000, $35,000, rounding off, and that excludes the air conditioning price, which I think at this point is hovering around $20,000, depending on which one you select.
So we're talking another $50,000 to do a hallway.
I have 65.
No.
If you do your fee plus HVAC.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't talking about the fee.
And
I'm
ju-
sorry.
and just for
Just
clarity,
all
that's
in.
not all hallway. there have been some things that we request. So for example, we were having the existing window sills in the tag room left alone cleaned. There was a request to get a price to replace those. So some of this work may be
What do you mean by the windows? Because I
the
was
window
there.
sills.
Right.
They are existing, and
Just an
we didn't.
actual sill,
It's-
not
it's-
the window.
No, not the window.
Not the part where there's like that,
No, it's just, it's
Okay.
the window sill,
Yeah.
the bottom piece
Yeah.
that you might put, a light or something on.
Yeah.
Those were originally just existing to remain, and there was a request to get pricing to replace those because they were felt to be unattractive. So we secured a price, that's included in this number as well. So there are 9 sills that go along the entire outside, and we secured a price at the request.
I have one other just follow-up question, just so I understand. I also think that as a board member, we're not in the committee or the committee, so it's just trying to
Sure.
grasp the whole
Yeah, yeah.
situation. So when you first were asked to look at, to consult about the whole building and
Mm-hmm.
to pick projects and to rate them, you rated the tag room, and so there was no, when you were looking at the building and things that needed to be done, you did not even consider the hallway?
Our original assignment was to walk through the building
Okay.
and to identify areas that could either be moved, carved up, reconfigured, or anything to accommodate office and/or other students within the building. And we did a few different options that resulted in a space being moved from here to there, the old tag room just getting a coat of paint. We did not prioritize anything, I don't believe. I
No,
think
no, we did, but you
Yeah.
looked at different areas.
we
Okay.
looked at, for example, and I'm not going to remember, and I see the principal here, and she might be able to help me, the room that has the 2 doors into it.
The orange
The
language.
long one. Do you remember the number of that room? Because I don't.
201.
201?
Oh, good job.
So there was an example where we said there's one long room with 2 doors into the hallway, and one of the recommendations we made was if you put a wall in the middle and you took that little small group instructional space office off the hallway, you could get 2 reasonably sized classrooms there. So there's an example of some of the concepts we came in. In the media center, we proposed so we came up with a dozen or so variations, and someone gave us direction that we have the money and we want to pursue, or, excuse me, can you develop a budget for the work in the lowest level? That's what we want to pursue. We developed a budget for it, and everything else was either tabled for a future date, or in the case of the old tag room, when it moved down, internal resources, we're going to put a coat of paint on the wall, and you didn't need our involvement for that.
Okay, now in terms of the hallway, in your professional opinion, wipe the slate clean.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is ideal in that space, in a cost-effective, to get rid of the humidity and to, because we don't have air conditioning in the hallways upstairs. and
Correct.
I understand it's a basement, in your professional opinion, what would you say is the bare minimum that needs to be done to deal with that? Not that we're just, to
So-
solve the problem.
So the first thing I would recommend is, we know there's an issue because of the adjacent spaces. So the first thing I would recommend is that let's address the outside spaces first, because if those address the humidity and the mustiness across the board, and again, as I mentioned to you, when doors open and close, the adjacent spaces are what circulate the air in the hallways. That might solve your problem, and the answer is, it's not going to cost you anything. The aesthetics are a different issue, right? But again, we were told when we developed the budget that the money was tight, and so we were just trying to continue to monitor and manage the money. I suspect if we were going to come back and say, well, here's the hallway cost as well, someone could argue, have been critical of us, saying, look, we told you we already have limitations. While it sounds like a great idea, we don't think we have the money for it. So
What about if
Can I
we-
interject for 1 second? That's actually not factually correct. We knew in June when we approved the 388,800 that it didn't include the hallway. We then gave an additional 15,000 towards the hallway. When we had further discussions about possibly replacing the T-bar ceiling, adding different HVAC, putting in the doors, we asked for a budget because we wanted to have that discussion because we know that's going to be an add-on expense, and we were completely expecting to spend that extra money to now address the hallway.
when you say the extra money, because I'm a little confused.
On top of the $15,000.
Right, but earlier you had mentioned, unless I misunderstood you, that the engineers, when we awarded the 383, our drawings were done.
Well,
We had already finalized the drawings because we had bids on our final drawings.
correct.
So I just want to back up a step because when we
At
had,
that time, right,
so our engineers were done with their services.
done.
Yes,
At that time, we realized that the 15,000 was only for the floor.
yes.
We articulated to you that we needed to do more. We discussed HVAC, we discussed the interior finishes, the ceiling, and the doors. We asked for budget. We still haven't gotten a budget, and that was in June.
Okay, well, again,
And while we did get some preliminary drawings on the HVAC system, there's been back and forth over it's not meeting our objective. The solution is not meeting our objective. We don't think that what you're providing in terms of the HVAC equipment will provide what we need. So,
I understand.
so it's not about we have a tight budget. It's about we don't know at this point. I mean, here we are now where the project has moved along and the window is closing on the hallway to get the work done in an efficient manner. We're going to have to finish the project and then start on the hallway second. So I just wanted to provide some clarity there. We're not saying that, we weren't expecting to spend any more money on the hall. We're not saying that we didn't ask you to do additional work by speccing out a door and replacing the T-bar ceiling in addition to just doing the floor. But I think where we're at now is that, we don't have a solution yet.
Well, because we have a solution, we gave you our professional opinions, and I'm led to believe that either we don't trust our professional opinion, or you want to go in a different direction. We gave you a professional opinion.
To be frank, we have a heating system that doesn't work. We only have one unit that's working up there that's been, 30, 40 years old. We don't know how old it is. So the
Agreed.
heating system is weak at best. And while the AC unit will probably work, it's not going to, like you say, work during the spring and the fall when there's no cooling demand. And it's obviously that weak little heater is not going to do much either, so we're going to have humidity problems. Now, there may be some residual moisture coming from the outside rooms, and as we finish those, that'll be less of a load in that space. Maybe it'll be just the opposite. Maybe all the humidity is coming from the basement wall that's right up against earth. We don't know. Our assumption was, and we asked you to provide an HVAC system that conditions the space, just like the space that's being done
So
for the
I
faculty
think,
room.
maybe that's where the communication is breaking down a little bit, because my understanding is that I don't believe again, the cabinet heaters that are in the hallway are still used to this day in hallways, and they're not there to heat the hallway. Generally speaking, the issue in public and corporate buildings is air conditioning. It's not heat. The lights and the population generally generate enough heat where that's not the issue in these kinds of buildings. And so the reason those cabinet heaters are there are merely to mitigate the cold air that might come down the stairwells at each end. And it's probably something you have in the existing building today as a means. There's no ducted systems in the hallways. In fact, hallways are 8 foot high as opposed to the 9 foot ceilings, just to accommodate all those little things up there, but you never really see ductwork running in those spaces. So I think, we were asked to, and again, from our perspective, perhaps what we should have said was, what is the ultimate objective? You keep referring to HVAC, and I'm led to believe that we were asked to design air conditioning and that the heating only came up later. Maybe we completely misunderstood. We were just responding to the requests that were made because, again, based on our professional experiences, we wouldn't be recommending some of these things normally. We would recommend the protocol that I said, which is let's look at what's going to be the resultant of the adjacent space, see if it solves your issue. So we are happy to do whatever you want. To your point, we don't need to revisit the history of how we got here. I'm happy to help you. And at this point, we are into 2 designs. And if you tell me very specifically what you want, even if it's not what we might recommend, we are happy to look at it for you, get a number, and try to help implement.
Wait a second, wait. I'm just going to ask the board to ask for recognition because a lot of people want to speak and there are people waiting ahead, okay? So, Mrs. Walker?
Just a quick, am I on?
Yes, you can turn, just, yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
You're good.
So to clarify what you said, and I appreciate your recommendation, your professional recommendation, that we can, there's no need to have heat in the hall. That's what you're saying, correct?
What I'm saying is that the cabinet heaters, which are small isolated heaters, are there located near doorways so that when cold air
Right.
rushes in, it provides a bit of a curtain so that the cold air doesn't rush down. So from that perspective, you do have heat in the hallway. What I'm suggesting is you don't need an elaborate heating system that is ducted to heat the entire hallway. It's a subtle difference, I just want to be clear.
Okay, so, and those cabinet heaters have been there a while, or?
Yes,
they've been-
I'm sure.
So we'd have to look at that before we could make sure that they're going to work,
It would
if we
it would
need
certainly be
them.
reasonable if
Right.
you wanted to look at those and replace those. The piping is already there, so that would be an in-kind replacement that is much less disruptive than putting a ducted system into
Right.
the hallway.
So your professional opinion is that we're hoping the rooms that are adjacent to the hall will be good enough to, or effective enough to keep the halls warm enough and cool enough, correct? Or are you saying we should get AC?
My
in the-
recommendation is that the systems that we've installed in the adjacent spaces are going to be providing code-compliant air exchanges today that didn't exist before. And we are confident that